Yellow.
Blue. If you mix yellow and blue, you get green.
That's right. Perfect. I remember I used to love that. I remember being fascinated with that concept when I learned it as a kid. When you could like mix the different, you'd have the watercolor paint stuff.
Yeah.
I thought it was so cool that you could create new colors.
Very neat stuff.
And then I got older and I started doing LSD and
and there are even more colors.
there are even more colors. And any color could become any other color.
That's my favorite. I took LSD like 3 hours ago. It's just amazing.
Yep.
It's good to see you again, Seth. If you remember, and you don't have to, that's okay. I'm also one of the assistants on the Woodard Report podcast. So we briefly met when I kicked that conversation off.
Oh, I thought I met you the last time I was on this podcast.
Also, yes.
Okay.
But that was a while ago. More recently on the Woodard Report. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
And Greg, we seem to be successfully live streaming, so it's a beautiful thing.
Oh, we're active right now. That's amazing. Yeah, when you turn it on, it goes out to the world. So I didn't realize that. That's cool. Let me get it up and running.
So you know, I came prepared again.
We have the answers.
Love it.
When in doubt, Magic 8 Ball.
Yep. Always. The other day, I was consistently getting like indefinitive answers from it. Like everything was like, ask me later. It's uncertain. It's like, okay. I think the writing is in the 8 ball.
See, with Trump, everything's uncertain.
There we go.
He's in the white Oval Office wagging his finger at Zelensky. It's hysterical. Yeah.
Wow. Ron, we are live streaming. All is well. So
yeah, I saw that. Greg, you figured it out, huh?
Ed and I figured it out. Yeah.
We just kept hammering at it until
it submitted.
Yes. That's exactly
I wish we
correct.
could do that with our feed, but
yeah. Well,
So is there somewhere I could go to see like who's on the live stream? Like, or maybe I should just focus on us right here anyway.
If you go to the soulofenterprise.com or .com/live, take your pick. On the homepage, you'll see a big banner at the top, and at /live, you'll see the various places where we are streaming. Seth, I have in the background an interface that pulls together all of the chats from Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and YouTube so that we don't miss anything. And if anything comes in, I will bring it to your attention so that you can focus on the conversation if you want.
Yeah,
cool.
I'll just focus on the conversation. This way I don't get distracted with it, because otherwise I want to be looking at the comments feed and like answer to my friends and say hi, and it probably will be distracting. So
yeah. Squirrel.
How are we doing today?
hey, good, Jordan.
Awesome. Glad to hear. I'm going to get some levels for everybody real quick. I'll start with you, Ron. Can I please get a count back from 5?
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Awesome. Sounding great. Ed, can I please get a count back from 5 for you?
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Awesome. Sounding great. And then Seth, how are we doing today?
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Well, awesome. Everybody's sounding great. We got about 2 minutes here until showtime.
Fantastic.
Awesome.
All right, so anything goes today, right? Whatever you guys want to talk about.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Or anything you want to talk about.
Well, you
can
saw
turn
my
the
post
tables.
on social media. I want to talk about why people stopped wearing digital watches in the late 80s and early 90s.
Only to come back.
And why do accountants still insist on using a 10 key? Well, no, in fact, I made a similar transition recently. Case in point, I stopped wearing I had a Pebble, and then I've had like at least one other smartwatch along the way. And I just didn't like them. They weren't that reliable. And so I went full analog. So I went for style over tech, which is not like me usually. However, maybe this is what we could talk about. For my birthday this year, my wife got me a Garmin watch, which is unbelievable. I love it. actually. It even lets me know how crappy my sleep patterns are. Like apparently I don't sleep well at all. I get very light sleep. That's it. I do very little deep sleep or REM sleep. Every day I'm obsessed with my sleep score now, which is like 45. And I think that's out of 100. Most people are probably like in the 80s. So I'm like terrible. I'm failing sleep.
Well,
About 30 seconds.
no, that sounds good.
In the background.
All right, take care, Greg.
Greg.
I never wore a watch until I started wearing my Apple Watch. Never wore a watch.
Yeah.
No.
It's not like I really use it to check the time. I usually look at my phone for that.
Yeah, that's what we used to do too. Now I use it, for other stuff like opening the front door and unlocking the
Oh, that's
car.
interesting. You do that with your watch?
Yeah.
All right, we are coming up to showtime. You ready for your count-in?
Yep.
You bet.
All right, have a great show. Going in 5, 4, 3, 2.
Welcome to the Soul of Enterprise Business and the Knowledge Economy, sponsored by Woodard, building your ideal practice with coaching, education, community, and resources. I'm Ron Baker, along with my good friend and Threshold colleague, Ed Kless. On today's show, folks, we're going to get into entrepreneurial nerdery with our second interview with Seth David. Hey, Ed, how's it going?
Great, Ron. Looking forward to this conversation all week.
It's always great to talk to Seth. He's the chief nerd and CEO of Nerd Enterprises, a firm dedicated to empowering accounting professionals and business owners through expert training and support. I'm sure our listeners are familiar with him, but he's also an animal lover and a creative individual committed to helping others achieve their best self. Seth, welcome back to the Soul of Enterprise.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here, as always, with you guys.
Seth, I'm going to start way out in left field.
Let's do it. That's my favorite place to be.
My sister-in-law 2 days ago had to put her dog down. And it was a rescue dog. And I loved this dog. Her name was Jessie. She was absolutely beautiful. Skittish, as you would expect from a rescue dog. But that is the worst part. I love dogs, but that is the worst part.
It's awful. It's awful. I had my first experience with dogs was after dating my wife for a while, and we were living together, and we were on our way we were supposed to go to like Pier 1 or something that day. If I remember correctly, we had some gift cards. We were going to buy some furniture for our little apartment. At the time, we were living in Hollywood. And it was like a last minute spur of the moment. She was like, why don't we go to the animal shelter? And I'm like, okay. And next thing I know, we're adopting the first two of our first three dogs, Ralphie and Xena. Ralphie kind of became famous because he ended up being with me in my profile image on social media for so many years. And so it just stuck. I never changed it. And then a few years after that, we got Hercules. So we had the three of them for like 15, 16 years. I mean, Xena lived to be, I want to say almost 18 years old. I forget if it was 17 or 18, right? Ralphie was her son. He was a year behind her. She was, so she was a year when she had him. And Hercules, we got him when he was 4 months old, and he lived to be about 14. Because he passed away within a year of Ralphie and Xena. Ralphie and Xena went 6 days apart from each other. The extent of the heartbreak is something I still haven't recovered from, I can tell you, especially losing all three of them in such a short time. But my wife and I couldn't stand the silence in our home we were so used to having dogs. And so within 4 months of losing Hercules, the last of them, which was especially heartbreaking because he was only 14, and we knew it was diagnosed early on that he was going to have congestive heart failure. He had like a heart murmur or something like that. We knew it. We were just hoping it would take a really long time, but it happened when he was about 14. So we couldn't stand the silence. And my wife started looking online, and next thing I know, she's like, hey, I found this rescue that's local to us called Dachshund and Friends. They have this litter of puppies that they actually brought up from Mexico. Apparently the puppies were found in a box in Mexico somewhere, And for whatever, I guess whoever found him knew about this rescue here near where we are in California, brought him up. And long story short, we ended up taking two of those puppies home with us. And those are the ones that everybody now has come to know as the mighty goddesses, because it's Aphrodite and Artemis are their names.
Love it.
And they have their own Instagram channel now. And I just love them. And they, we'll never get over losing the ones that we've lost. But you're right, Ron. It's the worst thing. It's the most awful. It's like you get so much joy having them in your life, and it's so painful to lose them and to let go of them. And in some ways, I think it's almost worse than losing a human that you're close to, because they're so dependent on you for everything. It's just a different kind of bond.
Yeah, and they just become part of the household, part of the family, and they're so great at mimicking humans and adapting to, I mean, they know when you're sick, they know everything. They're amazing creatures.
Yes, they are. Yes, they are. And that's why I never had an experience with this until I met my wife. And, she loved animals, had dogs her whole life. So she's the one who really introduced me to this world. Growing up, my parents didn't want to have dogs because my mom she was smart enough to know she would have been the one that had the responsibility of caring for them and walking them. And she had no interest in that. So.
And Seth, that's a big part of your, charitable mindset, right? Is you give to outfits that rescue dogs.
It is now. In fact, inspired by, your book, Time's Up, I started thinking about what would I want to support. And this was the obvious one. And so I officially started doing it with my recent Black Friday promo at the end of 2024. I did a promo. I didn't do a Black Friday thing for like 2 years. I said, I stopped discounting my courses because I felt like it was devaluing my courses. And this is a little business tip, if you will. What I started realizing was that nobody was buying my courses until I ran a promotion, because they had come to expect that I'm going to run a promotion soon enough. So why would I want to pay full price? To the point where people would email me like in January and say, are you going to do a Valentine's Day promo? Because if you are, I'm not going to buy your course yet. And I was like, okay, now I understand what I've trained people to sort of expect. And so I changed that. I said, in fact, I did two things. First of all, I permanently reduced the cost of my big courses. And I said, instead of $2,500 each, we're going to knock them down to $1,500. So they're on a permanent promotion, in a manner of speaking. Typically, what I would do is I would discount them by 20% from $2,500. So it'd be like $1,800, right? So I said, I'm going to go even lower than that. I want to make it really affordable. So $1,500, but no more promos. So we didn't do a promo for 2 years. Then this year I said, you know what, let's do a Black Friday promo. Because really what I wanted to do was something centered around the charitable aspect. I wanted to really take what I was learning in your book and put it into practice in the most specific way possible. And so I did. So I said, I'm going to take 10% of the proceeds from this promotion and donate it to Dachshund and Friends. Translation, I donated almost $1,600 to Dachshund and Friends. And I have the most amazing testimony. And now I understand why it's so important to do this, because I can't tell you, even as I'm saying this, I'm getting chills thinking about the gratitude that they expressed to me. They happen to have just had a dog that they rescued who went through surgeries and cost them, I think they said, almost $20,000 in vet bills to take care of this animal, because they rescue dogs that oftentimes are in really bad shape. And so they couldn't thank me enough, and they kept expressing how timely and helpful it was, especially a donation. I'm sure they're not used to getting those kind of donations. Maybe they do, but they were just, again, I experienced firsthand, and I knew I would, but maybe even more impactful than I would have anticipated, like why this is such an important thing to do, and why it should be such an integral part of how everyone, evolves their businesses now. And as a result, I've been working with my 97 and up group very specifically on defining that purpose-driven component of your business. I understand now why it's so important, more than the obvious.
Right. And I know you're going to have Paul Dunn on, and when you get him on to talk to your communities, he's going to talk about that whole living your legacy, leaving a legacy, and his outfit B1G1 that helps firms around the world do exactly that. So that's really cool. Last time you were on, you talked about your journey from, what brought you out to California, the addiction, the rehab, all of that. But I'm curious, I was reading your website earlier, and you tell a really interesting story just about, being employed versus being self-employed.
Mhm.
What inspired you to go out on your own? What?
I hated working for people. I, I honestly did. That was, it's funny talking about recovery. In recovery, they say that a lot of people will start like a new meeting based on a resentment. I started my business based on a resentment, essentially. I couldn't say I had one experience after another after getting sober of working for people where it was the same experience. At first, it was great, and then it wasn't, and then it was awful. And I got tired of working for abusive people who would berate you for making a mistake instead of teaching you and training you. And I said, I'm never going to do that. If I have people that work for me, I'm never going to raise my voice at them. I will never berate them for making a mistake. If anything, I will assume the blame for their mistake, meaning that it's my job. I did a poor job of training them if they made a mistake. And
Right.
I've taken that approach with every employee I've had, and there haven't been many, but there've been a few. And so I started my business because like I said, I had one experience after another working for a PG-13 here,
No, not really.
working for assholes,
Yeah.
and I got tired of it.
You,
Right,
you tell the story on your site about sitting on the steps outside the office.
Okay, yes.
It-
I'm sorry. So, all right. So this was even before that. I was newly out of rehab, and so the normal thing, you get a temp job. Luckily, I had the accounting degree. That made it easy. So I went through an accounting temp. I think it was account temps at the time is what it was.
Mm.
And so I got this job working for a hedge fund in Santa Monica. And here I am, like probably not even 6 months sober yet, getting up at what to me at the time was an ungodly hour, and I remember driving to Santa Monica and it's cold out, in the winter time, and stopping by a Seattle's Best stand for my cup of coffee and going in there. And so they put me in front of a computer and they said, "Do you know how to use Excel?" I said, "Sure." And they said, they didn't give me any templates. They just told me to design my own Excel spreadsheet to perform some of the things they needed to gather data around the investments that this hedge fund was investing into. And so, as time went on, typically you figure, all right, I'm working at this temp job. I'm hoping it's going to become permanent. I'm getting to know the people. The woman who was my supervisor was a little bit distant, but this guy, Bill, who sat next to me, was very friendly. I liked, he was a funny guy. But then it came time to go to lunch one day, and I normally would bring my bag lunch with me because I couldn't afford to go out to lunch. I was fresh out of rehab and making $15 an hour at this temp agency at the time. It was less than even, well, I guess it's worth even less now. Anyway, so their thing though was we can't let you stay in the office while you're here. We have a policy, like we don't let anybody who's not actually employed by the company. And I remember looking at them and going, I just want to sit in the break room and eat my lunch. Like, is that okay? Like, I promise I'm not going to steal a pencil. I swear. I have pencils at home, And they were like, no, they were adamant about it. And so literally I'm sitting out there on the steps of this office on the corner of 5th and Santa Monica. If anybody wants to go there, it's like a historical place in my life, right? I sat on those steps outside that office building, eating my brown bag lunch in tears because I just felt, I was like, why did I get sober? If this is what it's come to, I don't want to stay sober anymore. At least if I'm high, I won't feel any of what I'm feeling right now. And so, yeah, that was another experience that made me, it wasn't quite the experience that led me to start my own business, but it was an experience that made me think if I ever have my own business, and maybe one day I will hope to, but man, I will never treat people the way I'm being treated here.
Yeah, that's very powerful. So, well, Seth, this is flying by. I knew it would. And folks, I'd like to remind you, if you want to contact me or Ed, send an email to asktsoe@verisage.com. You can also go out to Patreon and you can sign up and get our bonus content. You can do that at patreon.com/TSOE. And now a word from our sponsors.
All clear. Back in 2.
Awesome.
All right.
You hit the curveball out of the park. That was good. Thank you. It's just so depressing that I had to put my dog down. I don't know, it was 4 or 5 years ago, and it was literally 15 minutes before Ed and I were doing the live show.
Oh God!
So I couldn't. So I couldn't.
Cancel.
I didn't cancel. I put him in the car, and my mom took him to, get to the vet. But I couldn't have done it. So I couldn't have sat there with him and while they were doing that. I couldn't do it. I'd be a basket case.
I thought about it, but I remember my wife telling me from her own experience. She was like, "No, you don't want to not be there. You want to be there for this. You want to know. You want to know that you had the experience." And I'm glad I did. As heartbreaking as it is, I still cry thinking about it. Some days
I bet.
can, And with Ralphie, it turns out this was a mistake, but I just wanted to, after they had put him to sleep and confirmed that he was gone, I said, "Can I please pick him up and hold him one more time?"
Yeah.
And I did, but it's just like literally dead weight. And I remember feeling, oh my God. And I just like, it freaked me out. I put him right back down, but in a way I don't regret it, but I would never do that again.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to talk about AI. Seth.
Yeah. Something a little bit more cheery. Yeah. I knew Ed wanted to go to AI. That's why I went to dogs.
Well, last time we did this kind of format, I remember where Ron, you were asking me questions about my addiction and recovery, and Ed, you were asking me questions about business. It was fun.
Yeah, good.
Coming back in 15 seconds.
All right, great. Thanks, Jordan.
All right, ready for your count-in?
Yep.
All right, coming back in 5, 4, 3, 2.
And we are back on the Soul of Enterprise with Seth David for a second time. And we are talking, well, I'm going to talk to him about AI. I'm going to bring it in from left field. We're going to land the right field and kind of land this plane. Seth, I came across an article a week or two ago by Dwarkesh Patel, and the article is what fully automated firms will look like. Fascinating look into it, and you don't have to have read it to understand the questions. I think it's just I wanted to give that as framework. But he proposes something pretty interesting, is that, if we get AI honed in the right place around a specific topic, we can replicate that indefinitely, rapidly. Mm-hmm. So what is that going to mean for once we really get these AI bots or the fine-tuned so that they are so good at one particular thing? What's going to happen? It really, I hadn't really thought about it, that we're going to be able to replicate them indefinitely.
Yeah, I mean, I think first of all we have to put a little context on that. Another layer in terms of the levels of AI that we're working with now versus what's coming, right? Because we have the LLMs right now, which is like massive autocomplete, right? There's not really any true intelligence behind it. It's just guessing what it should respond with based on a humongous data set. Now we have agentic AI just coming out, $200 a month. Most people won't pay that kind of money to play with a toy, right? But some of us will. I haven't yet because I'm just busy with other things. And then we'll have AGI, which is not adjusted gross income, but rather artificial general intelligence, where it truly becomes autonomous and it can come up with its own concepts and even strategize and implement. Totally autonomous, doesn't need us. No more input. Prompt engineering will be gone, right? No need for that anymore. I kind of suspected when it first came out, especially when the whole idea of prompt engineering blew up, I felt like that was going to be short-lived. And I believe it has, although now I see an uptick. I've noticed it seems like more people talking again about prompt engineering. But going back to your question, what's this all going to look like? Well, I mean, we've talked about this recently separately from this conversation, where it's funny. I had a conversation with ChatGPT. So I have one chat that I use with ChatGPT for pretty much everything. So it just knows everything about me, which minimizes how much prompting I need to do now. And it's got templates that I like to refer to, so I can give it like a stream of consciousness, something I've written, and say, okay, put this in this one particular template, boom, spits it out nicely organized. So I use that for everything. You're talking about having agents, let's just call it, right? That will be specialized in doing one particular thing really well. So where's that going to go? The first thing is all the stuff we've been saying is going to get automated, now truly will be. I don't think I'm going to need to be coding transactions in a bank feed for very much longer. I think that's going to be completely automated. The only thing I might do is review it. And in cases where it's not a question of right or wrong, but it's a question of preference as far as how something gets coded, I might be able to interact with that agent and say, hey, do me a favor, don't code this to print and code it to advertising or something like that, right? So things like that. But as I've said, I think ultimately where this is going to go is my prediction, and I had this conversation with my chat GPT assistant where I talked about this specifically. I said, where's this all going? First, I started asking it. I said, can you please explain to me the difference between LLMs, agentic AI, and AGI? And I got it. And that inspired an article that I recently wrote on LinkedIn, laying out everything I learned basically from a conversation I had with chat GPT. Imagine. Oh, I got it.
Sorry about that. Yeah.
That was perfect. That's chat GPT calling, actually.
Yeah.
So I had this conversation. It inspired the article, but it also got me thinking that my prediction is potentially, if done right, as you pointed out, this is going to get us out from behind the screens potentially and back in face to face with clients, because it will truly enable us. In fact, I would go as far as to say it will force us to work with clients more strategically, because we won't have the need for any of that compliance stuff. All that compliance stuff is going to be automated. There's no question about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's this weird combination of the fact that you can not only replicate talent, but you can also specialize it as well, so that you can get deeper and deeper into specialization, and at the same time, so you can go vertical and horizontal at the same time. Which is, I mean, we can't do that with human beings. It takes a little bit longer to transfer and replicate knowledge from one person to the other, but AI does it instantaneously.
Right. And AI doesn't need to sleep, doesn't need to take breaks, right? It doesn't need HR.
No benefits, Social Security.
Which for some people is probably a dark sort of glim kind of aspect of this, but I think it doesn't have to be. I think
no, and that's where I wanted to go next. Is where do you think the human involvement? What do we evolve into when we're really managing agents? I mean, that's effectively what we're going to be doing.
Yeah, I mean, let's put it this way. I guess I can best put it in the context of what I hope for, right? And my hope is that this doesn't go in the direction of Skynet, but rather it goes in the direction of us as humans being able to be more human again. I think we've largely gotten away from being human because we've gotten locked behind our screens. And I mean, I even read articles now talking about younger generations like Gen Z and, and probably up and coming Gen Alpha, where they actually get a lot of anxiety around the idea of talking to a person face to face. It's like, what was that Bruce Willis movie where everybody actually stays in their house and they have these robotic avatars that go out in their place into the world to do things. And you learn that you can't leave. It's too overwhelming to leave your home in that world. It was some sci-fi movie. I forget the name of it. But we haven't obviously gotten quite that extreme. But I think we've gotten, in many ways, a lot less human about things. We're looking to automate, and that's a good thing because we want to do things not just more efficiently, but as you guys always say, more effectively, right? And efficiency is okay as long as it's effective. It's not okay when we lose effectiveness. But I think that ultimately, my hope is where it's going to lead us is back to being human again, back to interacting, using the agents to do their thing, to produce information, even to analyze and interpret that information. But then we put the human touch on it and say, okay, this is what we want to do with it. And then we go back to the agents and say, okay, based on this analysis and interpretation, here's what we want to do, or here's what we want to do differently. Right. And then go ahead.
What do you think that means in terms of like a productivity? Like, can you see? We had a guest on Jim Pethokoukis about a year ago where he talked about there's a very real possibility of going from a regular 3% economic growth to 30% economic growth because of AI, and that would mean a doubling of the standard of living every 3 years. For all of us, which would be absolutely incredible. But the point is it has precedence. We have gone from 0.3% economic growth back before 1800 to 3%. So that tenfold increase has in fact happened.
Right. So what's the exact question?
So what does that mean for us as human beings when we see that much rapid growth? I'm really trying to get your insights into where do you think the human side of this is going to be 5-10 years from now? The AI is cool, the technology is cool, but what does it really mean for us? What will we be doing?
It's a good question. I think that it's going to be, first of all, it's going to be a choice, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to have to make a choice about what we sort of do with that, right? So to kind of scale it back for a sec and look at it differently. So I'll give you an example. I'm about to launch a coaching program. I have very specific plans for that coaching program to build it and scale it in such a way that over a 3-year period, I largely get out of it. I think in some ways AI is going to be able to do this for us to get us out of a lot of the day to day, right? Because anything that's repetitive, done. But even things that aren't repetitive, when we talk about completely autonomous AI, again, it can do the analysis for us. It can make the recommendations. Right. So then it's just a question of me taking those recommendations and choosing what to do with them. And I might go back. So the AI is going to be like an employee that I work with who does the work, does the research, makes the recommendations, and then either I have more questions about those recommendations, or I take the recommendations and go run with them and implement whatever it is. So a quick example, right? I'm going to be putting a webinar out there soon that I feel like addresses something that a lot of people in our industry, who are focused on AI are already kind of missing, which is that there's still a lot of people in our industry who haven't even touched this stuff yet. I would guess most in our industry have not yet touched this stuff because they're afraid of it. They don't really understand it. And so I'm going to do a webinar soon on how to get started with AI for accountants and bookkeepers. And so one of the things I'm going to be demonstrating for them and giving them an exercise to do is where you'll take a set of financials and drop it into ChatGPT. But first, you'll also give it a template that I want it to use that says, here's how I want the financial analysis that I'm going to ask you to do to be structured. Then I drop in the financials. Of course, for security, before anybody says it, we're going to remove the client-specific information, right? So we'll call it client X or whatever. But we'll drop that in, and then ChatGPT will spit out the analysis for me. So all that work is going to get done for me. So I'll look at that analysis, and then the question is, do I need more analysis, or do I have enough here to implement decisions, right? And then it's a question of how far are we going to go in terms of letting AI make decisions for us, and then implementation. And will it go as far as where, will we ever give our AI, let's just to put it in the extreme, and I know most people are going to be like, no way, but that's what we say about all of this until we start doing it and redefining what the boundaries are. But will I go as far as to let AI have access to my banking and actually execute transactions for me? I mean, potentially it's going to go there, right? If I wanted to, if I want to let it, do I trust it? Most people won't for a very long time, right? Until somebody does and says, no, you know what? Now I don't have to worry about initiating transactions because I've trained the AI and I trust it to work.
Yeah, we do that to a certain extent. Now you can sign up for payments, right, and just say just automatically at the end of the month pay my entire credit card bill. Done.
Okay. But what about a strategy where my company has excess cash and I want it invested? And am I going to want to rely on AI? Some people, I'm sure, will. Early adopters at some point will go in there and say, you know what? Let's let the AI analyze the markets and make those decisions and actually execute trades for me if we want to go to the most extreme, what this looks like.
Yeah. I just wonder how far we are away from having an AI where we basically as an individual upload all of your financial information for a given year with a series of PDF files, and it spits out the tax return back for you. I mean, we can't be too far from that. We really can't.
And even when we get there, the question is, how accurately will it make sure that we're getting the best tax advantages, right? In other words,
that'll be the competing AIs, right? Because you'll have people with different tax strategies that prompt engineer which ones to use. But we are up against our break, Seth. This has been fantastic. Thanks so much. We'll talk some more in the fourth segment, but we want to remind those of you listening that you can get a hold of Ron or me by sending an email to asktsoe@verisage.com. We do have our Patreon channel available at patreon.com/TSOE, where you can get the show commercial free, as well as our bonus episodes that Ron and I do after each. But right now, a word from our sponsors.
All clear. Back in 2.
Yeah, thanks for bearing with my questions, Seth. I'm on the assumption side now that AI is going to be able to do all of these things,
I
and
agree with you, yeah.
I really want to know now what's going to happen next for us, because
Right.
I think there is a next for us. I don't think we're just going to sit on a beach drinking Mai Tais. I think just
Unless we can, right? Unless we can, and that's something we want to do. That's kind of where I was going when I said I think it's going to be our choice, right? But like ultimately, look, perfect world. When I start scaling this coaching business, um, I might be able to have AI within the next year or two take care of all the marketing for me, so that I just have a constant funnel of prospects coming in who want to
Mhm.
apply to be in my program and go into the subscription model. I will definitely have a wait list, right?
Mhm.
um, where I'll only take on so many people each month. And so, in the near term, I think I'll see the AI at least handling the whole marketing process for me. Because if I can get that done, I don't want to do marketing. It's hard, right? Right. But if the AI can figure out the strategies and somehow create bots that put content out there that somehow draws in the traffic that I need, as long as I'm not sacrificing anything, obviously in terms of ethics, but also just in terms of quality.
Yeah.
Like right
Right.
now, I would never trust AI to write content for me because it's obvious that it's written by AI. I've seen it. I see it
Mhm.
every day. I can see things that people have posted that it's very obvious to me are written by AI, and that's why I do it. I think we talked about this. I think you said you do it the other way, but one of the reasons I like to write something first and then give it to ChatGPT to clean up for me is I feel like that way they're my words, and ChatGPT has just kind of spruced it up a bit for me,
Right.
as opposed to taking something ChatGPT has written and then expanding on it or kind of rewriting it in my own words. It's six of one, half a dozen of another, but I've done it both ways, and I prefer the way I'm doing it now.
Yeah, I primarily do it that way as well, where I write some kind of a outline or whatever and give it to ChatGPT to clean up. Yeah.
Yeah. That way it's your editor and gets to know your voice, and just like an editor or a
Yeah,
speechwriter for a president. Yeah.
yeah.
They
And
write it
I
in their
do use
voice.
it that way very much, and it often confirms to me how it has kept it in my quote authentic voice, and I love
Mhm.
that. I love that. It makes me feel very confident in it when it tells me that. So.
Well, are you ready for your count back?
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. Coming back in 5, 4, 3, 2.
Welcome back, everybody. We're here for the second time with Seth David. And Seth, you were talking about AI with Ed, and I do have a question for you. Do you remember, God, this is going back, John Nesbitt,
I
Megatrends?
I remember Megatrends. I vaguely remember the name John Nesbitt, but I should say no, I don't. You'll have
Well,
to
he was the
refresh my memory.
author of Megatrends. I think it was big in the 80s, if I remember right. Kind of
Okay.
along the lines of, Future Shock, Toffler. He kind of came after him, I think. But he had a great phrase. He said, the more high tech we get, the more we're going to demand high touch.
Hmm.
And I always remember that. High tech leads to more high touch.
Hmm.
I guess my question for you is, I've been reading The Economist, and they say the actual adoption rate of AI in business has been relatively slow. You
Hmm.
would think it'd be much greater, and it's not. A lot of people are using it, but like you said, they're kind of using it as a toy. Do you see adoption among your community? And if so, what are they doing with it? And do you think they can make a transition to high touch? Or will they just go out and get more of the things that can be automated with AI?
Interesting. So first of all, I do think that there is not that much adoption. In the we'll talk about the accounting industry because that's where I work and live. I think adoption is relatively very low. Of course, you have your early adopters and certain groups of people that have gone to the extreme of adoption with it. Some, from what I see, are just playing with some really cool use cases, but from a purely practical standpoint, it's not stuff I see your typical accountant or bookkeeper touching, at least not now, right? Which is why I want to address that in the very near future, as of this recording, as far as putting something out there that invites in the people who haven't even touched it yet, and getting people started with it. I do agree that it will get us out from behind the screens and get us, like you said, more high touch eventually. I think what will happen with adoption, I think if we look back at history with any of this kind of thing, disruptive technology, what happens is adoption is slow at first, and then at some point it's just going to pop. And at that point, when it pops, it's going to be because people are going to finally realize what they probably should realize by now, which is that either you're going to be forced to adopt this or you're going to be forced out, right? I mean, imagine an accountant in 2025 saying, you know what, I'm not using computers to do my accounting. I'm sticking with green ledger paper, right? Imagine somebody manually recording entries between different subledgers, right? Obviously, it's ridiculous, right? You laugh because it's ridiculous, but this is going to be another version of that, right? Eventually, I remember many, many years ago, but well into the computer age of accounting, I got a call from a client. Guy was based in Beverly Hills. He was probably in his 70s, like old school CPA. And he called me up because he found me online and he was like, I'm old school and I have this program I've been using to run my firm, my practice, that still runs on DOS. And he's like, honestly, I don't even remember exactly what he needed my help with, but he wanted me to come to his office and he paid me to consult with him hourly. Don't chop my head off. So I went in there and I remember working with him to try and help him. I think he was trying to, I forget what it was, but it was the point I'm getting at is this was a guy who was still using DOS-based software when the rest of us were well into the realm of using Windows and, Mac. So you're always going to have that. And then I think, but like I said, eventually that guy had two choices. Either he was going to have to retire because there was no way he could continue to function using DOS-based software, or he was going to have to adopt and learn and make that decision. And I think especially for those of us, like I even think about this myself, and I know I'm still pretty young, I'm 54, but I still think, how much of this am I going to take before I say, you know what, I'm out. I don't want to deal with this anymore. I just want to retire and sit on the beach and not sip margaritas because I'm sober, but something else.
Play with the dogs. Yeah.
Play with the dog. Yeah, exactly. My dream is a cabin on a lake with my dogs and writing books, right? And even that, you've written a number of books, Ron. How's AI going to impact that? Right? How much of a hand is AI going to have in helping you write a book now? I sat down at one point and I thought, just for fun, I'm going to prompt AI with a basic description of how I want a story to start. And it wrote such a wonderful chapter for me that I was like, I can't wait to read more. It was amazing what ChatGPT wrote. And then I struggled and stopped actually because I was tempted to go on. But then I was like, wait, if I actually went to publish something like this, what would happen? Would people feel like I had done something unethical by publishing something that I didn't really write? I wrote it with my prompting of the AI. Like at what point do you own it versus the AI? I'm curious, Ron. What do you think about that in terms of?
It's a great question. I mean, for a lot of nonfiction, AI could probably spit out something much better than I could. The only comparative advantage I have against AI is I have a soul.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we're going to have to really lean into that a lot more.
Yes.
As it takes over more and more of these, utilitarian functions.
Yeah. And that's what I meant earlier when going back to Ed's question about it was we're going to have to become more human. That's really, you said it actually better, is we're going to have to lean on our souls. And because that's the one thing we have that AI can never have.
Yep. And like you're 97 and up, that you're going to launch here soon. If you could automate everything, that'd be great. But you're still going to be on those calls. Yeah. And you're still going to do that one-on-one coaching because that's very human.
Yeah, there'd be no value in it. If I told people, hey, you know what? I programmed AI to give you the exercises and you're just going to sit in front of my GPT that I created and then let me know how it goes. Nobody's going to pay for that. They're paying for the value that comes with me working with them one-on-one. And yes, I've taken time to prepare these exercises. I've spent an excruciating amount of effort in it. And I've had ChatGPT help me organize the content once I've written it. Right. And it's given me some great ideas, actually, where I've created lessons based on my conversations with my assistant, right, quote unquote, which is really ChatGPT. And one of the coolest things is, you mentioned something about this earlier, Ron, is when as I had been working on the exercises for this, as I write each exercise, and there's one exercise for every week, the way I'm outlining the program, I've pasted it into ChatGPT. So guess what has happened as a result of that is ChatGPT is now familiar with every lesson in this program,
Hmm.
which means now I have very little prompting required to say, hey, do me a favor, write a quick marketing message for me about this program and some of the benefits. It knows exactly what to point to. It knows to talk about Notion because my obsession with Notion has very much infiltrated its way into this program. It knows about Time's Up because it knows that a lot of what I've created in this program is directly influenced by the Time's Up book. And the same thing with David Allen's Getting Things Done very much influences this program that I've developed. So all I've done, that's the thing, and I think we probably all can quote somebody who said something like this at some point, which is nothing that we're creating is really that original. It's just our flavor.
Right.
Right. I'm taking all the different sources that I've learned from for over 20 years and saying, I'm going to take all this experience and put it into a program. And really what people are paying me for is that I've organized it for them. And then I'm going to train and teach. Right. And that's what AI, it can do to an extent, but like you said, it will never have the human aspect or the soul.
Yeah. And then I'd be really curious, Seth, if you prompted it to say, okay, you know about these courses I've taught, you know about these books, take me somewhere else, take me beyond this, or take me to the next thing. And I wonder what it would come back with.
I will do that, and I'll let you know because that would be fascinating to see. In fact, it's funny you mention it. I should be, if my system is as good as I like to say it is, I should be able to pull this up very quickly. But I just clipped something because I'm constantly scouring the web for like articles that give you different kinds of chat GPT prompts. And this one was actually really interesting to me. So I'm almost there. I'm going to pull it up on my screen here. And it happens to be the most recent thing I clipped. And so the first prompt, I thought this was fascinating to do, is, hold on, Instagram's a little slow right now. Okay. So this is assuming you've spent some time interacting with ChatGPT. The first prompt here is analyze my communication patterns based on our conversation so far. Tell me what you observe about my thinking style, decision-making approach, and potential blind spots. There's a prompt for you. I'll give you a couple more out of this, and I'll give you the link if you want to share, because this is the kind of stuff I look for because it's super high value in terms of ways to use ChatGPT that I had not thought of, right? Next one, this is number 2, the 80-20 rule. I want to master input your skill, right? In record time. Create an unconventional learning approach that bypasses traditional methods and focuses on the vital 20% that delivers 80% of the results. How's
Wow.
that for a prompt? Let me give you one more. Extreme devil's advocate. Challenge every assumption in my thinking about insert topic. Push back hard on my logic. Identify cognitive biases and propose radically different perspectives. How about those just for starters as a way of really learning? And just to go back into left field with this, I one night went down a serious rabbit hole and I've developed a whole new obsession with octopuses thanks to ChatGPT. Because one night I simply prompted it and said, I'm bored. And ChatGPT gave me some options for things that I could do with it. And one of them was like learn some interesting facts about marine life. So I went with that one. That got me down the rabbit hole of octopuses. And I started learning quickly how fascinating and actually alien like these creatures are. And now, because of that, I bought a whole book called The Soul of the Octopus. Right.
That's
And I'm watching a
awesome.
series on Nat Geo about what amazing creatures these are. So nothing to do with what I do for a living, but a rabbit hole I am thoroughly enjoying because now I find octopuses fascinating.
That's great. That's fantastic. Seth, this is unfair. Less than a minute. You have a college student come to you. They know they want to get into accounting. What advice do you give them? They're going
They
to
want to get into
graduate next
accounting.
year. Yeah, they're going to graduate with an accounting degree. What advice do you give them?
Make sure you understand the accounting fundamentals. That's number one, right? Debits and credits. then learn the tech that overlies the accounting fundamentals. Just had a conversation with somebody today about this, talking about a potential course we're going to do. And the thing I stressed, and I think the same answer applies here, is you can't just learn the software. You have to understand the fundamentals, the software, just like I talk about with productivity software. The software is not the system. The software is the tool that executes the system. So if you're going to get into accounting, you better understand the system, which means debits and credits and how financial information flows from one statement to the other. If you understand that, you can plug in any technology and figure out how to use it in short order.
Would you tell them to go to a Big Four or smaller firm?
My experience was originally to go Big Four. At the time, it was Big Six. It didn't work out that way for me. Honestly, I can't answer that. I think it can go either way because I know people who have gone that route and said, you know what, it pigeonholed me. All I'm doing is auditing cash for banks for 2 years.
Right.
So they get very pigeonholed. Whereas a small firm, you're more likely to get exposed to more diverse things, right? At the end of the day, I'm just glad. I'll tell you this. I'm really glad that I got an accounting degree and that I got CPA firm experience. I did eventually get that. And so that by the time I went to work for myself, I had a really solid foundation in those accounting fundamentals in that system. So that, for example, when the day came to learn QuickBooks, I didn't need to know the software that well. I figured out how to use it very quickly because I knew what I needed to learn to get the software to do, which is to get that balance sheet right. And then, of course, the P&L, right? And then everything else falls into place. So again, it goes back to the same thing. I think it could go either way. I wouldn't necessarily want to push somebody one way or the other. I think it depends on the individual and what's going to sort of be right for them.
No, that's a great answer. Well, Seth, thank you so much. This has been great having you back on the show, and Ed's going to take you the rest of the way home. Folks, I'd like to remind you again, if you want to contact me or Ed, send us an email to asktsoe@verasage.com. And now a word from our sponsors, including Woodard.
All clear. Back in 2.
Yeah, that's always a tough question. I get asked that a lot. What advice would you get? It's like, well, I'd like to know something about them, but generically, I'm like, no, I don't think you have to go to the Big Four anymore.
No.
I think you can go into a smaller firm. I see all the innovation in the smaller firms.
Yeah. If anything, the bigger firms, I'm assuming, are laggards. They're going to be more slow to adopt.
I mean, they have a lot of money to pour into initiatives, and if you can get on a team working on something pretty cool, that can be kind of neat. But otherwise, you're just going to be a cog in the machine.
Right.
No. I just dropped a thing in the chat. Seth, you want to check it out? This is a AI generated go-to-market bot that I came across this week.
Okay.
That will have your initial, sales calls with prospect.
Nice.
And it's an agent.
Okay. I've got the page open.
Uh-huh.
It's funny. I started working with an app recently, trying to look at their existing training modules and see about making recommendations to improve. And they were clearly using an AI generated person who was like in the video delivering the lessons.
Yep.
And it was awful. It was just very unnatural looking.
This is, but this is as bad as it's going to be right now.
Sure. Yeah.
Right. That's the idea with this. And somebody brought up an interesting point on this, is that the majority of field salespeople get their experiences doing qualification, right? That's where they start. If you completely wipe that layer out, where do you get new salespeople from?
Right.
Coming back in 15 seconds.
All right, you're gonna like where we're going, Seth. Oh,
awesome. Back to left field.
I've got an opening volley question that then you're just gonna just talk for the next 8 minutes. So,
well, that's easy for me to do.
and keep in mind that we will about 57. We have to get wrapped up and out. So,
sure.
All right, ready for your counting?
Yeah.
All right, coming back in 5, 4, 3, 2.
And we are back on the Soul of Enterprise with Seth David. Seth, 3 times this week, 3 independent people have sent me links to Notion. Completely independent of each other.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me what's going on. What's happening here? Why is this a technology I'm missing?
It is my obsession, right? I mean, for years I did videos on QuickBooks Desktop, then QuickBooks Online, and then a lot of other productivity software. I kind of adopted the policy that if I learned how to use it and it helped me in my business, then I should make videos on it and teach others how to use it. Because after a while, I just get bored just doing accounting and QuickBooks videos. Notion has become my absolute obsession, and it happens slowly, kind of like a drug, right? You try it for the first time, you're like, whoa, all right, that was cool, but I'm not so sure. And then you keep doing it. The best way I've heard Notion described is by one of its own co-founders in a video that I watched, because when I get this deep with the software, I want to know everything about it, including the people behind it. And I want to make sure the software is not going anywhere. And if you Google like Notion VC funding, you'll find out in short order, they are very, very well funded. They're not going anywhere. They've got lots and lots of cash on their balance sheet. The way he described it is it's digital Lego, which means that what they give you is a blank page with access to all kinds of building blocks. And it's up to you to decide how to take those building blocks and use them on a page to compile information. Whether it's the stuff you have to do today, this week, and next month, or it's just information you need to reference later on, meeting notes with clients. I mean, what started out was for me as just a desire to have a better note-taking system because I was using ClickUp for project management, became a situation where the more I learned how to use Notion, the more I moved things, processes out of ClickUp and into Notion until I was like, I don't need ClickUp anymore. So Notion, ClickUp out of the box with project management software, and it's great. Notion, there's a little more assembly required, but as they say, with great power comes great responsibility or something like that. And the reality here is with a little bit of setup, which means, yes, there's a little bit of a learning curve, but once you've got that, if you can conceive it, you can create it. And Notion, my contention is that if and by you, I'm using the collective you. If you start using Notion today and start learning how to use it, within a year, my prediction is it will replace as many as 8 different apps that you're currently using now. So it's consolidating. And I think that's what a lot of people want is they don't want to use 10 different apps for 10 different things. Notion for me now is where I take all my notes. It's where I track every project, every client, right? Everything I need to do, every conversation I have. I keep a daily journal, so I have the timeline of things that I've done and worked on. And the thing about Notion, it's funny, years ago, I saw somebody comment on Twitter, I think this was before it was X, and he said something like, oh, Notion is linear, it's terrible. And I'm like, you don't know anything about how Notion works, if that's what you think. Because Notion is not linear. It is very much a network where I can link to anything from anywhere. And the real key that exploded it for me was I already have a pretty good idea of how databases work. I have a computer science background as well as an accounting background. So I understand how databases work. More importantly, I understand how linked databases work. So when I started learning how I could create databases and then link information between the databases. So I have clients in one database, I have projects in another database. So anytime I need a new project, I go into that client, I add the project. That project is in my master projects database, but it's linked to that client. So when I'm looking at that client, I'm only looking at projects that are set up and assigned to that client. So it's like writing software without having to know any code, right? And the bottom line is I have everything now in Notion. And really, really important criteria on this, as with any app that you ever use, is the mobile app. A lot of mobile apps, especially it seems like the more robust the software gets, the worse the mobile apps tend to be because they tend to have lots of features and functions that are just very hard to design for a smaller screen. Notion has done an amazing job of that, where everything is accessible. It might be tucked away because it's in a smaller screen, but again, when you take the time to learn how to use the tool and figure out how it works and how to use it, then you find that with Notion, the mobile app gives me access to absolutely everything I need, which is important. I talk about the haircut test. The haircut test is if I'm working on something here at my desk, and as it turns out later today, I do in fact have a haircut appointment. When I get to that haircut appointment, they say, have a seat, she'll be ready for you in 15 minutes. I better be able to pick up right where I left off on my tiny little mobile device without hitting almost any friction. And with Notion, I found that to be absolutely true. the mobile app works every bit as good. So no matter where I go, and certainly on a tablet, I've got the best of both worlds in some ways. So bottom line is, it's like I was saying before, Notion is just an app. It's Lego, it's digital, it's building blocks, but it's not the system. So you still need a system. And what I built out in Notion was basically David Allen's Getting Thing Done, which is the system, executed with Notion in a way that really makes sense to me, that addresses everything that I was ever missing from the many different project management apps I've used for many years. And at this point, I'm probably 3 to 4 years in with Notion. I can't imagine ever using anything else.
It's just amazing to me that, like, I had heard of it a couple times in the last 3 or 4 years. Perhaps, you had brought it up maybe the last time we talked, but in 1 week, all of a sudden it was boom, 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 boom from disparate sources that are coming together and sharing this stuff with me. Well, I looked at it a little bit earlier this week, and the thing that it reminded me most of, and I've spent a grand total of 7 minutes with it, so it's is that it reminded me of Lotus Notes way back in the day, like what you could do with Lotus Notes. So.
Give me 15 minutes on a Zoom with you, showing you what I've built, and I promise you your head will be spinning, and you'll be like, oh my God, I couldn't have pictured that it could do all this.
Yeah, pretty amazing stuff. Well, Seth, we've got 1 minute left. I want to ask you just to an underrated, overrated question about a topic we've already talked about. Is AI underrated or overrated?
Both.
Okay.
My answer honestly is both, and I think it depends on what aspect of it you're talking about. I think in the bigger picture, it's underrated because so many people are so afraid of it that they're not realizing the potential benefits of it. And then it's overrated probably by the early adopters who are like, oh my God, this is so amazing. Look at all the stuff it can do. But the things they're showing that it can do is what I would call like pie in the sky stuff. That's just, it's cool, but it's not practical. Not yet anyway.
Mm-hmm. All right. Seth, this has been fantastic. Thanks so much. We'll have you again on at some point in the future. Love talking with you. Ron, what do we got coming up next week?
Next week, Ed, we're going to continue with our One Thing journals.
Nice. Love the One Thing shows. See you in 167 hours.
This has been the Soul of Enterprise Business and the Knowledge Economy, sponsored by Woodard. Building your ideal practice with coaching, education, community, and resources. Join us next week, folks, on Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, noon Pacific Time. In the meantime, check us out at thesoulofenterprise.com. We'll have full show notes with our conversation with Seth David today. And if you want to contact me or Ed, send us an email to ask@tsoe@verisage.com. Thanks for listening, folks.